YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, etc. And for that studies the patterns of birds. Now all of a sudden, instead of having to like, just sort of hope that they can track these birds, they're actually able to track the movement of birds. Cicadas track the same thing. So what is the difference? Oh, one last example of getting, we're talking about how we can add more and more layers of meaning, but someone has to do that. This was, I think from like 2013 or 14, I can't remember when this was. The New York Times, Penny Till It Hurts. And this started off by accident. The New York Times reporter went into a Facebook group and was like, hey, how much are you guys paying for, I forget what it originally was, a hip replacement. Wasn't that, but, and everybody started saying, oh, I'm paying this much, I'm paying this much, I'm paying this much. It's interesting. And so the reporter, Elizabeth Rosenthal, started asking everybody, and pretty soon they started being able to get a sense of what is the average US price of things like a colonoscopy, a hip replacement, Lipitor, et cetera, et cetera. And she ended up creating a community of people that were all now sharing information about how much different things were costing, which they were sort of in the dark before, right? And so this allowed her to do kind of reporting. Not only did it help her in her reporting on healthcare, but it also created a built-in audience. Whenever she was reporting things on this, there's an audience of people who are like, hey, I helped contribute, and I'm interested in this. I want to know what's going on. But in all of these, there are a few fundamental challenges. One, when expertise or time is required, and I'll explain, I'll give an example of that. Because somehow you have to sift through all this information. And again, I was one of the people that would sift through some of this information sometimes. An example I give is, again, when it came to crowdsourcing, the way I put it is there are times when crowdsourcing is really beneficial and times when it isn't. And again, we'll use the Reddit example versus like the Osama bin Laden sort of emotional trafficking. If I wanted to guess how many jars are in this jelly bean, crowdsourcing it would be great. I'd say, hey everybody, how many jelly beans do you think are in the jar? Everybody gives their numbers, and I can average it out, and that would probably be a good way to guess how many jelly beans are in the jar. If I'm on an airplane and the pilot goes unconscious, I am not going to ask everybody how we should land this plane and then average out that answer, right? Because I have two major constraints. One, time. I don't have time to ask everybody how you think we should land this plane. And two, my first question is there a pilot on board, right? And if there is, come to the front, right? The other example I give sometimes is brain surgery. If I'm going to have brain surgery, my first question is there a brain surgeon? And again, under no circumstance am I going to ask everybody, how do you think my brain surgery should go, and then average that out and decide that's the answer. So those are sort of, it's time and expertise end up being kind of filters for all of this. And as a result, we ended up, despite this whole movement that I described, my readers know more than I do, the people formerly known as the audience, that Harkin thing of like, how do we get the public involved? Despite all those intentions, there's a lot of coulda, shoulda, woulda, because there were fundamentally problems. I'm essentially describing bottlenecks, right? And those bottlenecks have felt insurmountable for a long time. Do you remember AI? It's a story about AI. That is a joke. Does anybody know Alice's Restaurant? I added this just like 10 minutes ago. Alice's Restaurant, great protest song from like the 60s or 70s, I don't remember. But it's like a 20-minute song. It's a story about Alice, except 7 minutes in, he's like, "You remember Alice?" It's a song about Alice, because he hadn't mentioned Alice through the whole song. If you're interested in it, Arlo got there getting it. But remember AI? Now we're going to come to where AI enters the picture. We'll call it 2 or 3 years ago. But I wanted to give 2 quick caveats that I always give about AI in general. The first one, who knows what painting this is? Anybody know this painting? It's a famous painting. It's by a painter named Magritte. And underneath it in French, it says, "This is not a pipe." And the reason why this is a famous painting is because the artist is playing a joke on you. Because what is that a painting of? So yeah, that's how you sure, you know what it is.
It's looking pretty pipe-like.
It does look pretty pipe-like. But that's his point. It's not a pipe, it's the painting of a pipe. It's the image of a pipe. Right? So that's his joke. This is not a pipe. This is an image of a pipe. I just played a trick. So ha ha ha, I'm the artist, I just played a trick on you. Because when you look at this, your mind sees a pipe. I mean, that's the only thing that you can really see. That is a pipe. But it's not a pipe. Ha ha. And I bring this up when we're talking about AI because when you are engaging with AI, this is what when I train reporters on this, I say, this is not a conversation. This is not an answer. When you ask AI a question and you're getting an answer, this is not an answer. it is the statistical representation of an answer. It is the statistical representation of a conversation. Now, it is so statistically significant that we find meaning in it, just like we find that to mean a pipe, right? And so I'm not saying it's not a pipe, and it is clearly a pipe, just like it is a conversation, but it's also not a conversation. It is the representation of a conversation. And that's something really important to keep in mind whenever you're engaged with AI, in my opinion. One other caveat that I always give is using AI is kind of like going from a handsaw to a chainsaw when you're doing something. You can cut down a tree with a handsaw, and it will take you all day, you'll be sweaty, tired. You can cut down that same tree with a chainsaw, and you can probably get it done in 20 minutes. But if you mess up while having a handsaw and it brushes up against your leg, you're going to be fine. If you mess up while holding a chainsaw and it brushes up against your leg, your day has been ruined and maybe even longer, right? So you have to be very careful while using tools, right? So power tools. And you can think of generative AI as an information power tool, and you have to be very careful while holding it. Those are two sort of, again, from the classes, an important caveat that I give whenever I talk about generative AI. You can see, like, this is some poorly done image prompting by me. So, everything old is new again. Remember, this is a talk about AI and social media. We talked about social media and engagement, and I sort of went through a brief history of this sort of movement of how do we get the audience involved, and I talked about some of its kind of core fatal flaws. Not fatal flaws, again, bottlenecks that, in my opinion, allow it to inevitably reach its kind of potential. And last year, actually, for Neiman, I wrote, AI helps us revisit old journalism territory. And I think this applies to a lot of different categories. And I could go into all of these in more detail. But to a certain extent, I think AI brings up the idea that there can be more than one major search engine. You guys have all grown up when Google was like the search engine, but believe it or not, there was a time when there were multiple kind of search engines, and there was more of a competition of who had the best results based off of what data they had. That becomes, I think, interesting. I actually worked for a search engine called Lycos, and you guys never heard of Lycos because it just got destroyed. Over time, Google became the only thing that survived. Return of the Reporter, I'll talk about in a little bit. Hyperlocal games, I'll talk about maybe in a little bit. The rise of the rebels, the return of citizen journalism. We're going to talk about that. I'll put that in the focus of this. But the pivot to video, there's this whole era of pivot to video in media and journalism content. I think all this comes back up because of AI for various reasons, which we'll talk about. But again, I want to focus on the rise of the rebels, right? The return of quote-unquote citizen journalism. So I worked on a project. I did this actually as part of a CUNY, City University of New York, I don't know what they call it, AI Journalism Lab fellow. I don't know exactly what my title was, but basic idea, you probably already picked up on what it was. It was, can we collect input from the public in different ways? And rather than some poor schmo, which was me when I was 24, having to try and understand everything just in their own mind, can we use generative AI to then identify important themes, highlight relevant comments, find meaning and value out of it, and reflect that back to the audience. And again, that reflection back I think is important. I'm using the word journalism here again, but I think more broadly, one way to define the value of journalism is that it allows a community to speak to itself. Right? That is the role of journalism here, is it allows a community to speak to itself. Now, historically, again, we talked 50, 70 years ago, that was the journalists and the reporters, that's what they would do. They'd get together, how do we allow this community to understand itself? We have to sort of play that role entirely because of the means of communication technology. But now, again, what is a Reddit group, right? Sort of a group talking to itself and coming to its own understanding of what it is, right? But again, how does that scale? You have a small Reddit thread of 50 people, they probably don't need AI. They can, when you're talking about a bigger community, and I'm using Reddit here, but extend the analogy to whatever you want. At a certain point, you need systems that can take content down, or take summarizations down, take meaning down, so that an individual can understand, oh, this is how I communicate to the 50,000 people that I'm connected to, and this is how 50,000 people I can find meaning back from those 50,000 people. So we started with surveys, right? And AI audience listing. And is it the next slide? Yeah. So the next slide is a video. And this has actually been refined, but I'll show you like the early demo of it. And in this case, we did this back in, it was right before the election. And it was in Michigan, one of our markets, and we basically said, hey, everybody, take the survey. Who are you voting for? What are the issues that are important to you? Who are you voting for? Why are you voting for them? What are the table stakes issues? Sort of like a similar kind of voting guide thing. So you'll see, and then the AI, we would, we got, I don't remember how many responses. Let's call it 1,000. An AI then would go in and find sort of like, let's say 5 or 6 themes. Hey, I looked at these out, and here are 5 or 6 themes that I saw over and over again. Right? Theme 1 describes it, and then would say, and then it would find comments, like actual comments from the 1,000 that best exemplify that theme. And then say theme 2, here's another theme. Here's some comments that best exemplify that theme. Theme 3, right? So that's what you're going to see in this video. In this case, it should play. Oh, it might open up to Google Drive. That's fine. Play here. I might even be talking over this, in which case you have to. No, okay. So here's just that spreadsheet. This is a back-end tool. Just uploading that spreadsheet here. That's got all the survey responses. And you can see here I type, what issues will bring you to the voting booth? We asked many questions, right? But in this demo, that's the question that I wanted the AI to do analysis on. So I could have, any other question. I could say, do analysis on this question, do analysis on this question. So there's like 1,000 responses. Oh, that's better. And some magic happens, and you can see here, voter motivations, issues, driving individuals to the voting booth. Theme 1, migrant and border security, description. Concerns about migrants and border security are a recurring theme among voters, right, blah, blah, blah. Relevance, gives a little relevance, and as you see, we'll scroll down. Example comments. And you can see here's a specific user, and their explanation. I looked around and go to my own country, taxes, going, blah, 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 right? And you can see the specific details about this person, but this is the main comment that associated them with that theme, right? Here's another one. This is the comment that associated them with that theme. Theme 2, you can see inflation. Oh, you see, so this is a video, and then I think this one to reproductive rights, right? You can see here, here's the comment that associated them with, I think that was theme 4, reproductive rights, here's theme 5, climate change, right? And again, et cetera, et cetera. And what's interesting about this is you can run this analysis, you saw how quickly it kind of happens. You can run that analysis 5, 6 times, right? 10 times if you want to. Now it's relatively easy to do. And it was interesting to see when the themes overlap, when it's like, clearly this is a theme that like, you can't do this analysis without, I'll just use immigration, coming up as the #1 theme, right? Whereas sometimes like the 5th one, climate change, would sometimes come out and there'd be another issue that would come in, right? It's like the 5th, right? And you could even run this again and say, exclude immigration, so you can start bringing it further down the list of important themes and priorities. And you can see here, conclusion, general topic, etc. Now, initially, I had built this, and it would even create like a sort of first draft. Like what you got there was sort of an analysis. And the reporters didn't like the first draft. We can talk about whether or not they're right or wrong on that, but that's an interesting sort of site. Oh no, because I mean, try back to the presentation. There we go. Boom. This was used in lots of different projects in the last year. And it's still ongoing. I'll tell you the main way it's being used right now, but this was it being used in Texas. We asked a bunch of Texas residents, hey, what do you think about cannabis legislation? People would respond, and again, you can even see here the format. This was a reporter who really liked that format, sort of stuck with that as the main format. Like, hey, theme 1, medical benefits, right? There's a description. Here are some of the comments that best fit that description. Economic and legal considerations, social justice, personal freedoms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? And you can see here a little disclaimer. This article utilized AI to summarize. This is me. I don't know what that is. That's just me messing with the slide. But yeah, you can see the example of how this got used. Again, you can see feedback on local laws. You just saw the example. Feedback on what topics motivate people with controls. Feedback on traffic in Staten Island. The one that has proved to be the most beneficial from a business perspective is feedback from local high school sports coaches. High school sports, believe it or not, in a lot of local markets, drives a ton of traffic in business and is actually very important. And we now will survey the coaches of a league and say, hey, what do you think about again, not a sports person, but like, what do you think about the local, the change in the rules? Tell us about your players. Give us, who's got the sob story, who's got the best interesting story. Tell us what teams you think are good. Tell us what teams you think are going to win, et cetera, et cetera. We take all that, and now we're able to produce these really rich stories to cover, again, a community able to speak to itself, right? And these are the coaches, those are the local leaders, being able to sort of speak to each other with us as a conduit, but in a way that we wouldn't have been able to before. And we wouldn't have been able to before for two reasons. One, again, too much information for us to absorb, right, if we'd actually done that survey. But because it would have been too much information for us to absorb, we never would have properly reflected it back out, in which case the coaches would have been like, why am I going to fill out that survey for you next time, right? You just wasted my time, right? Yeah, I filled out the survey. I'm being dramatic here. I'm not that angry. But you get the idea, right? Like why, again, that engagement ladder, if you don't meet someone on step one, they're not going to go to step two, right? Hey, coach, fill out a survey. I filled out the survey. Now what? Silence, right? Hey, coach, you want to fill out that survey again? No, right? Hey, coach, we filled out the survey. Now what? Oh, we published some stories with that survey. Oh, that's great, and I'm going to share that with my team and show everybody. Oh, that's amazing, right? That's how you go up the engagement ladder. You have to be able to meet them, but again, to meet them, you have to be able to, in this case, be able to deal with that amount of information. Lessons. Less can be more. I already mentioned that original version may have been a little AI overkill at the beginning. This is a little bit into the weeds, but prompt chaining, which is really just, if you've heard the word agentic, has anybody ever heard the word agentic? It's a new buzzword that's being used. Agentic AI. It just means AI that kind of does steps, talks to itself in a way, is a lot better. And the main thing here is adoption means iteration. Right? It's a process. And as you sort of got a hint, right? It's all about going back and forth with the reporter to sort of figure out what it is that you can do. Here's another example of a video. Let's see if this should. Oh, this will play in line. So, what's another use case of this? I've talked about us doing surveys, us getting what I'll call proprietary information, right? But I think in this case I'm doing Reddit, and Reddit again is a great source of us being able to understand what's happening in the community. This might also be. No, this is Instagram. Sorry, we're going to look at Instagram, and this one is actually us doing it on our own Instagram post. So, we put up Instagram posts. I think I'm using the in Michigan, and there might be 500 comments on that Michigan post. And again, our reporters are busy. They want to be able to know what people are saying, what the feedback is, but who? Again, I'm not trying to sound facetious here. Who has time to read 500 comments on their own Instagram post every single day, right? So in this case.
Demonstrate
you're going to hear me talking. This is actually a video that I made to demo it for the reporters. You can see there's a little tool here that the tool is involved.
In this case,
here, let's go forward a little bit. This is, am I using Michigan again? No, Cleveland. So this is cleveland.com. Here's some posts. They've got 782 likes. We're putting in that Instagram URL.
From here, I can.
We're grabbing the information.
The results will appear here, and they will also be emails.
Look, I'm talking about have recognized the mayor if they'd been hit by a car driven by the mayor. And the person who was the reporter out there knowing the mayor couldn't write themselves out of a paper bag. 2 jobs, right? Now, for the last, I'll call it 40 years, give or take, not only did those 2 jobs become one person had to be the reporter and the writer, we also asked that person to be the photographer, to be the social media editor, to be the videographer, to be, I'm sure we could come up with 10 other jobs that they all had to do one thing. We call them the backpack journalists for a little bit. And one thing that I see happening right now is AI is taking some of those things away and saying, hey, actually, you know what, I can be the writer, right? Again, once we get the system down, you can give me the things, and I'll do the writing. I can do the video, I can make the video, I can do this, right? So that's great, right? So the question is what's left? And I would argue what's left is that original job. And I don't think AI can do that. AI cannot be the person who can read the room. Cannot be the person that becomes the trusted person that when you do have something to tell someone, oh, hey, I don't even, what's your name?
Natalie.
Natalie. Hey, Natalie, I see that, you're the reporter who's been, going back and forth in City Hall. I have something to tell you, Natalie. It's important. I'm going to talk to a human being who can, so your job, the reporter's job in a sense, is to go back to shoe leather reporting, to find the new, to be the trusted person that people will go to mediate what eventually gets fed into an AI that might. So it's, and this is where it gets uncomfortable for some people because, again, for that last 40 years, I think a lot of people think that journalism is synonymous with being a writer. Right? Some people think that's synonymous. Was not always the case. This person was a journalist, just like this person was. This person was not a writer. So they were not always one and the same. Again, I see it all the time when I talk to people. What do you want to do? I want to be a journalist because I like writing. But if you want to be a journalist because you like to understand people, talk to people, find out what's actually happening, be, again, someone who can read the room, for lack of a better term, like understand the community, understand the nuances of relationships, right? I think that becomes super important, more important, because that's actually going to become the differentiator between AI slop and AI content that is like informed well. It's going to be that person's ability. So I think that's the thing that is, I'll use the word protected. That's the thing that you can excel at and go into. Did that answer your question in a long-winded way?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And I'll actually add, think about what we talked about on Monday in class. The AI is probably really good at helping you find that actionable insight. Not going to be really great at helping you create that big idea. That's going to be what you're going to have to do, right? So.
That was a good question. Are there any other good questions? In that case, I'll let you guys go. And I forgot what I was going to say. Again, David Cohn, not hard to find. You can Google me if you have any questions or anything. I'm trying to make myself a little more accessible. You're all fantastic. Good luck.
Thank you.